Let's talk a bunch of different topics.
How'd her career get there?
This is a podcast with Lauren Asghari.
Hey, everybody. Thank you for listening. Hit that like button, leave a positive comment, or hit subscribe to get alerted when new episodes drop. All of this will help keep the project going. Thank you for your support and enjoy the episode. This is the Lauren Asghari podcast, How'd Her Career Get There? And my guest today is Erin Lamb, who is the president and CEO of Gateway Maryland, also recently named a top 100 woman by the Daily Record, and also previously named a leader in diversity by the Baltimore Business Journal. So welcome, Erin.
Thank you for having me. It's nice to meet you. Nice to be here. And I'm looking forward to telling my story.
Excellent. Excellent. Well, let's start present day, and then we'll get in our time machine and go backwards to kind of learn how you got where you are. But for starters, give an overview, if you will, of what Gateway Maryland is.
So Gateway Maryland is one of the oldest and largest nonprofits in Maryland that people have never heard of. And so I'm happy to be out telling our story for impact. We have the mission to give hope, change lives, and build connections for Marylanders through our speech therapy, sign language, audiology, and special education programs, because we believe in a world where everybody can understand and be understood. So what that means in practice is that we have a school for students with autism or other social language dominant disorders. We have an outpatient medical practice for audiology, speech therapy, and occupational therapy. And we have a 24/7, 365 sign language interpreting department. And we are the only nonprofit provider of sign language interpreting services in Maryland. Last year, we served 8,255 people in Maryland and 7 states. And so we are 100 years old this year. We are a vibrant community of people who are looking to make sure that people have the opportunity to express their wants and needs and have access to the support services that they deserve to create lives of choice. So it's a really amazing institution with a really amazing team members and community members, kiddos. And so it's really fun. And I find a lot of joy in what I do.
That is quite a milestone, 100 years. What a great thing for the organization.
We were founded by one of the first female doctorates out of Hopkins back in 1926, which I think is really badass for 1926. And so we've had a few male leaders over the years, but we've been primarily female-led since our founder. And so it's a really significant perspective or role that I feel like I'm carrying on that legacy. And I want to create that foundation for the next 100 years of the organization.
Wonderful. Wonderful. Well, let's get in our time machine. We're going to go back to Erin when she was a little kid. So give a little bit of context for the audience, where you were born, if you had siblings, what were some of your personality traits as a kid?
So I was born in Rhode Island, and most of my family is still there. My dad, my stepmom, all of my maternal side of the family, my nieces. I have a sister in Boston, so very New England heavy. But I grew up in coal mining town in New Jersey with my mother, my stepfather, and my brother. And when I was in high school, I did a lot of not community theater. I did high school theater. I did community theater later as an adult. But I was an academic kid. I was a bookworm. I read a lot. I did theater. And when it came time to look for professions and figure out what I wanted to do after high school, I remember I'm old enough that we would get those books in the mail from different universities. Catalogs would show up in the mail once you took the SATs or the PSATs and your name got on a list. And so these books showed up and I'm flipping through and I kind of knew what I didn't want to do. I knew I was kind of interested in medicine, but I didn't want to be a doctor. The thought of going to medical school and dealing with that was just not interesting to me. I knew I liked education, but I knew I didn't want to be a teacher. And I loved performing, but I knew that I didn't necessarily have the God-given talent to go and make it big someplace. And so I was flipping through that book that showed up at my house. And there was a profession that I really didn't know much about, and it was speech language pathology. And I was like, that looks good, because they described it as a combination of medicine and education and theater and performing and voice and diction. And I was like, all right, I'm in. And so I went to college as a declared freshman with a major in speech language pathology, minor in special education, and I've never looked back.
Wow. And did you
Yeah.
did you go local or out of state?
So I grew up in New Jersey and came to Maryland to go to Loyola, then college, now Loyola University. So it was their book that had in it the Department of Speech Language Pathology and Audiology. That's what it was called at the time. And I was like, yeah, looks good. And here I am, still in Baltimore 30 years later, though.
There you go. Can't shake Baltimore once you're here. It's tough to shake.
Even though no one embraces me yet. I'm like, I've been here as long as the Ravens, but I don't count because I didn't go to high school here. So I have to lean into like, I'm as old as the Ravens, and I'm trying to see if that gives me any social capital around town.
There you go. Let's go Baltimore. Let's do better for Erin. All right. Let's make her feel like a native here. What were some of your personality traits as a kid? What were they, and who did you get them from? Because I know we just talked a little bit about your traits, but what was like one or two distinct things that you either learned from your parents or another adult or a mentor, but one or two things that you can identify as like, this person taught me this and it's carried me through my life and has served me very well?
That's a great question. I think that I've always been curious, and I honestly don't know where that curiosity came from. There was something about, like I mentioned, reading books. I've always been a voracious reader, and books and reading helped me answer questions that sometimes I didn't even know I had, or it just sparked ideas to be like, oh, I never thought about the world that way before. And it just started layering on different perspectives from mostly fiction. Like I learn a lot about the world from fiction, and not that I take those stories and make them fact, but just how different brains think about things, how different authors are going to process or create characters, or how different people in the world are going to interact with each other, because it's all based in something. There's all some expression of the human experience that's showing up in fiction books. And I've just always been curious, fueled by the reading. And honestly, um, some of that is a trauma response in some ways of being a highly anxious kid, spending a lot of time alone, and not really realizing it at the time. So reading was my escape. It brought me a lot of joy. And I think it developed that curiosity to keep reading, keep exploring, and keep trying to answer questions about what's going on and why is the world like this and what is my place in it.
Mm-hmm. Do you find that would you consider yourself still an anxious person?
Oh, absolutely.
in a harnessing it in a productive way, or something that you also have to manage?
A little bit of both. So there's a colleague that I work with in a networking group who told me about someone in her network who named their anxiety so that they could be like, oh, here she comes. And they can personify it to try and manage it better. And that has been a useful tool for me over the past few months, where my anxiety is now named Lilith. And so whenever I can feel Lilith coming on, it's a good way to communicate to friends, to support systems that I might be a little off, or I might need some help, or I'm not maybe feeling my best today. When I can just text friends and say, oh, Lilith is showing up. They're like, got it. And then they know to check in with me later. And I do the same for them. So I am still a very anxious person, but I also know that my anxiety, Lilith, can be useful in helping me see the future 15 steps ahead of where it is and determine how I should react right now to be proud of who I am 15 steps down the road. And so it's like she's a useful person in my life, but she definitely has a place that I need to manage her, and she cannot be my entire personality. And I didn't, when I was younger, and I probably didn't really realize how anxious I was until the last 6 years or so. It was really the pandemic, when the pandemic hit and the world shut down, I realized that I had already been doing on a daily basis all of the self-care things that we are supposed to do. I drink a lot of water. I spend time with friends. I work out a lot. Like I eat healthy, all the things. But then the world got harder and I had nowhere else to go. And the anxiety ratcheted up. And so it's been a very interesting kind of mental health journey over the past 6 years and figuring out how to use all those different parts of my brain and my body together for good and not let one piece take too much control.
Yeah, one of my best friends, one of my dearest friends in the world, we've been friends for, geez, I can't even do that math that quick, probably 35 years, has high anxiety. And her explaining it to me, kind of like what you just said, just really like, it was such a release, not only for her, but also for me from a friend in terms of like, okay, how can I support you? Because for her, it wasn't useful to say, okay, calm down, it'll be okay. It's like, that's just adding to it. So I love that you said that, and I think it's good for people to hear, whether you're a person that has high levels of anxiety or you're just trying to be supportive of somebody that does. It's like listen to them and let them tell you what they need or don't need, and I think that's really really important. And to your point, I think a lot of that has spiked post COVID. So
yeah, and I think that we can make judgments about people, and I made judgments about myself. I don't think I realized how anxious I was because I was always on time and my hair was brushed. And I have a friend that we joke about that. Like people think I have everything together because I'm on time and my hair is brushed. But that's actually an anxiety response too, where I'm like, I have to be on time and I have to be put together. Otherwise, things are going to fall apart. And so I internalized my anxiety. And so I didn't see it because in my head, highly anxious people were flustered. And I am not flustered ever.
Right.
Slightly hyperbolic. I'm rarely flustered because it's all internalized. And so recognizing the difference between the internalized and externalized behavior has been extremely useful, both as a professional, as a leader, and a parent and a friend, and all the different hats that I wear.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely right. And hearing to your point, releasing judgment of yourself and or of other people, I think is just a big unlock in a lot of ways with anything, judgment of anything. So take us back to college. So you know what you want to study. You go to Loyola. You finish school. What's your path then to get your first job out of school?
So I'm very efficient, if nothing else, and strategic. And so for my first job out of school, I took a role that I loved. I was a pediatric speech language pathologist at an Easter Seals school up in Philadelphia, where they paid for my second year of graduate school in return for 2 years of service. So I was like, great. I was footing the bill for most of graduate school by myself. And so to find a job that I loved in a city that I wanted to try in a way that was extremely affordable was incredible. So it was one of the best decisions I ever made. It also, going back to that anxiety, which you didn't know you're running a mental health podcast, I took the job between my first year and second year of graduate school. It was a 2-year full-time program. So I applied during my first year, got the job. They paid for that second year of graduate school, and I moved to Philadelphia about 10 months later. So when all of my friends and other folks in my cohort were competing for jobs, trying to figure out what they were doing, I was like, I'm done. I already figured it out. I had the answer. And so I moved to Philadelphia for 2 years, moved back to Maryland in 2004, and then had to start looking for jobs like a normal speech language pathologist again. And I had 3 offers that I was weighing when I was looking to move back. And I couldn't make a decision. They were different. They were very different places, different compensation, different cultures. As a treating speech therapist, working with kids, and I couldn't make a decision, which is very rare for me. Like I'm usually can make the decision and go. And what I've realized since that time is if you can't make a decision, you're probably not asking the right questions. And so I couldn't make a decision and I was stuck. And then another posting popped up and I was like, that's the job I want. And it was a pediatric acute care speech language pathologist down at the University of Maryland Medical Center. So I turned down the other 3 roles and took that one. And it was a dream. I was working with children and families and babies, medically fragile, working in the NICU, working on feeding skills and things that are very unique for a speech language pathologist. And I loved it. It was wonderful.
And how do you go from that where you're I'm assuming now as president and CEO, you're not practicing at the level that you were obviously then. How do you go from day to day practicing your craft, your area of expertise, to then running an organization?
Um, this I don't know if I'm proud of these answers or not, but it's the truth. So, well, I went from working at the hospital to my next role was clinical faculty at Loyola University, where I had done my undergraduate work, which was my dream job. So when I graduated from school, I was like, that's what I want to be when I grow up. I'm going to go out, I'm going to get experience, and I'm going to come back and I'm going to be faculty at this university. I love this. This is great. And it happened. Do you remember the duck boats that used to tour in Baltimore in the harbor? I was leaving the hospital one day and a duck boat thing is driving down Green Street. And one of my old professors leans out the side of this duck boat. She's like, "It's me." And I won't name her to protect the innocent, but people who know the university know exactly who it is. It's me. We've been trying, the duck boat's going, right? So like she's yelling at me and I'm walking down the street and the duck boat's going away. She's like, we want to talk to you about a job. And I was like, this is great. So a duck boat got me to what I thought was going to be my dream job.
I don't want to
So
interrupt your career. I don't want to interrupt your career story, but I have to ask this. So they are local on the duck boats. I always wondered, like, who is it? Tourists that ride the duck boats, or is it locals that ride the duck boats?
She was a local. She was on a field trip. That was part of her. She was like, it's me. And I'm like, yes, I know it's you. She's like, I'm on a field trip.
Gotcha. Okay, back to the important.
Nice to see you.
Back to the important part of the story. Okay,
so the important part of the story. Locals rode the duck boats when the duck boats were still around. When they had field trips, right? Because like the 4th graders and 5th graders do their like Baltimore field trips.
Makes sense.
So it was wild, but I worked for the university for 10 years as clinical faculty, and I loved it. It was wonderful. So it was a step from treating one-on-one. I was the therapist. I had a patient in front of me. When you're university faculty, you're training graduate students to be therapists. So there was somebody in between me and the client, but I had still like 30 clients that I would see, 6 to 12 graduate students a semester. And so it expanded the number of individuals that I was working with, and it changed the relationship that I had with that end client. And I didn't miss it, which I was surprised by. I really thought I would miss the one-on-one, being that interventionist, being the service provider. And I didn't. I really loved teaching. And I think that's where my recovering theater kid came into play, because I loved being in a classroom. I loved delivering information and having graduate students ask questions and challenge and practice things. I loved being in the clinical setting and still being able to be in that space with children working on their speech and language skills, with the graduate students, with the parents. And I loved it. And so I started looking for ways to develop within the university, because I really thought I was a lifer. I thought I was going to be faculty there forever. And I hit some roadblocks. I began my PhD because being a master's level person at a university can be challenging and be limiting in terms of advancement. So I started my PhD. And
that's limiting in terms of, because you have to have a certain degree in order to teach certain level students, or pay. It's based on pay.
It's not based on pay necessarily, though that is a factor, but tenure, most of the time, you're only going to get tenure at a university if you have an advanced degree, an EDD, a PhD. To be certified and credentialed by different organizations from a program perspective, you're spot on. Certain classes have to be taught by people with different degrees. And so there would be times where a master's level person might be extremely qualified, but a course has to be taught by a PhD. And so they would have to bring in an external person who was also highly qualified. But it's just a challenge to get the matrix to work to make
makes
sure
sense.
that certifications maintain themselves. And there's the research piece, the writing piece that's expected at universities, and PhDs and other doctorates are the people who are advancing research in that space. And I didn't have that until I started my PhD. And I thought I was a lifer, like I said. And it was fascinating. I was at the university for 10 years, had some leadership roles, and couldn't quite crack, like, not quite a glass ceiling because we were all female, but like I couldn't quite break through to like the next level of leadership. And I couldn't figure out why, because I was doing all the things. I was checking all the boxes. I was getting wonderful evaluations. And I did some research and I talked to some folks and I did some reflection. And what I realized was that, you know, that phenomenon when you go home to visit family at like holidays and how everybody reverts to those personalities that you had when you were kids, and your parents always see you as their kid, and there's always that power difference. I believe that because I was an undergraduate student at the university and then a graduate student, even though I left and gained wonderful experience, when I came back as faculty, I could never break that
Perception or that view.
Yeah, I was always Erin Lamb that showed up in 1996 and not the Erin Lamb that was in front of the university. Because of things like tenure and because it was a wonderful place to work, there were faculty members that I had as colleagues that had been instructors when I was in school. And I really valued them as mentors, still deeply connected to many of the women that I worked with. But I didn't want to be the Erin Lamb of 1996 for my entire career. And so this is the part I'm not extremely proud of. I got a little spiteful. I got a little angry. Probably a little teenage rebellion, like, oh, if you're not going to see me for who I am, I'll show you, which is not how I want to be as a human, but honest.
Yeah.
One night I went home and sat on LinkedIn and kind of angrily punched away at keys like speech pathology, director, jobs, like just, I don't know what I was looking for. I hadn't looked for a job in, I don't know, 14 years or something. And this job popped up, the one that I'm currently in. And so I threw my name in the hat, and I felt very fortunate that I didn't need a job. I wanted a change. I didn't need a job. I didn't need a change. And so what I do love is that every step of the interview process, I showed up as my full, authentic, unfiltered self and was like, because I didn't have the risk of employment. Like I knew I had a job. And so my risk was completely unmasking and being like, this is who I am. You want it or not. And somehow they kept saying yes. And that was 11 years ago.
Isn't that marvelous how being just true to who you are ends up just the universe puts you in the right spot?
It's hard. It's a hard skill to learn. And it's a hard skill to, I don't know. I do think it takes a little bit of bravery to show up as your authentic self in the workplace. But my phrase now is I bring my authentic self to work. I don't necessarily bring my full self. There are certain parts of me that are still reserved for my children, for my friends, for my family. But I'm authentic at work. If anyone that I work with listens to this, they're going to be like, yep, there she is. There she is. And things seem to be going well. The organization is doing well. I've built a team that I'm really proud of who are crushing it on a daily basis, who are very passionate about the work that we're doing. And I'm really proud of what we've done there.
What I love how you just said that, and I don't want to I'm not going to exactly quote what you said because I'm going to butcher it a little bit, but the point, bring your authentic self, not necessarily your full self. I think maybe that is what you said. I love that point. You know, I feel like nowadays it's like obviously as the CEO or president of the company, you're going to have a different you're going to talk to your employees maybe different than you're going to talk to, I don't know, your grandparents or your kids or your best friend over coffee or wine, right? So there is this thing of bring your authentic self, like be true, be sincere, be whoever you are across the board. But there is still a level of, there's appropriate conversations for work that you may or may not have with other, so I think that's an interesting balance, especially nowadays, is making sure that we're bringing our authentic selves, but not necessarily like, that doesn't mean that everybody wants to hear your opinions about every single topic in the world. The
And
balance.
I try to create a culture where my employees can bring their authentic selves,
Mm-hmm.
but not their full selves.
Mhm.
Like, I don't need to know all your stuff.
Right.
I don't need to know all the things. I don't need to know it all. And I don't want to, because I think privacy is still very important, and boundaries are extremely important. And it provides that psychological safety that folks need to be able to show up and produce and do their jobs.
Yep.
And I think those concepts can get conflated sometimes in the workplace, where, especially in leadership roles, which can be lonely, folks can have a hard time setting those boundaries, which is then just creates a challenging culture for people across the organization at all levels.
So you just touched on in the past few minutes a couple of topics I want to just unpack a little bit more. And I know that you said that it wasn't your proudest moment, so we'll just revisit it briefly. What, looking back, I mean, obviously the choice that you made to leave the university put you in the position where you are now, and you're thriving and impacting the world in a different way in this role. If you could give that Erin advice or guidance, what would you have done differently? How would you have handled it differently if, somebody comes to you and says, if you're looking at Erin in the mirror and you're giving advice, what would you say?
I think I would give the advice to my younger self, and maybe even younger people in my network, that it's not always about you and it's not always personal. Everybody is doing their best with the tools that they have. And I think that I took it personally in a way that it was not intended. And I wish that I had the ability to separate myself a little bit and elevate the conversation in my brain to more of a strategic level, and ask why, and be curious. Because I do think that when I got spiteful and went home and started looking for a new job, that was a time in my life where I wasn't curious. And I think that's why I'm not super proud of it. And don't love that was the instigating event, even though I adore my job and still adore the relationships that I have with my former colleagues that I'm still extremely well connected with. But I think it was that curiosity. I wish I had sat down with someone and been like, why and what can I do? And is there a path? And then make a more informed strategic decision as opposed to a reactive one. It worked out, and I'm happy. And I'm, like you said, I'm thriving. Thank you. While also, I don't like being reactive. And I think maybe it's that curiosity, like I've been referencing, that can typically keep the reactions balanced and a little more measured.
You touched on leadership a minute or two ago. How do I want to ask this? So, what about your job now, and maybe looking at it through the leadership lens, what is the best part of your job? And then what's the kind of underbelly or the more difficult thing that leaders maybe don't say out loud because they don't want to sound like they're complaining, or, oh, woe is me, I get to run the company and these are the problems that I have, right? Like, talk a little bit about the great parts and then the parts that are challenging in your seat.
I think, like many roles, the best part is the people, and the most challenging part can be the people. I think that the relationships I've built, the relationships for impact that I have with colleagues, with networking partners, with centers of influence, are extremely valuable to me. And I find a lot of support and guidance and wisdom when I am noodling on a problem and my job feels lonely because I can't necessarily talk about it in-house and I have to rely on some external partners. Those centers of influence and people in my network that I've met who are, um, anywhere from a solopreneur to other nonprofit leaders, those relationships have brought so much to my life, both from a leadership perspective and personally. And so that's wonderful. And I love that part of my job. I love going out and telling our story to new audiences, to new people, and creating relationships that are going to have impact for our organization and community. I think, especially in the nonprofit space, there's a lot of misconceptions. I think people hear nonprofit and they think, oh, you don't have to worry about money, which
I think
is the most
yeah, go ahead. Having sat on
confusing.
nonprofit boards, I know that's not reflective of reality.
Yes, thank you. Thank you. I mean, I walk around saying nonprofit, no money, no mission. Nonprofit's not a business strategy. Like, it just means that I'm not buying a boat. We're reinvesting anything that we are able to earn back into providing pro bono sign language interpreting services, to making sure that individuals who have Medicaid have access to hearing technology that they deserve, to making sure that our students have access to field trips and mental health supports that our tuition doesn't cover organically. And so we need to make money. And so I spend a lot of my time fighting against the misconception about what it means to work in a nonprofit and to run a nonprofit. It can be a challenge to have volunteer bosses. And so I spend a lot of time with my board talking about their role so that hopefully, should they go serve on other boards, they know how to show up for that mission and the community and the leader, because it is hard. And volunteer bosses, you want to make sure people have access to information in a way that's ethical and honest and transparent, while also measured and consistent with the goals that you're trying to achieve.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's a constant that this is where Lilith comes into play. Sometimes she can be that lens, that anxiety lens of like, okay, what's the worst thing that could happen right now? And am I okay with that? Yes. Okay, fine. Then I don't need to tell this story. I can tell a different one, or I don't need to challenge this person about that question. I can just let it go. So the best part of the job is the people, and the hardest part is fighting back against people when they say things that are inconsistent with
Mm-hmm.
who we are and what we do.
Mm-hmm.
And I guess the last thing I'll say is, even in 2026, I'm 10 years into this job, I still fight against people who are like, oh, nonprofits, isn't that great? Good thing you don't have to pay people market wages because they just want to work for you because you're a nonprofit.
Right. Of the goodness of their heart, they'll make all these sacrifices. Yeah.
We fight against that every day. And so we pay a living wage for Baltimore City. Like, we benchmark all of our salaries against the market, which helps us attract and retain top talent. And we are committed to that. We're not going to underpay someone because they should just feel good about the work that they're doing. I really say that every job, when done correctly, is a mission-based job, regardless of your tax status.
Mm-hmm. Oh, I love that. I love that.
Thanks.
What is most of your guys' funding through like private donations or state money or a combination?
We are mostly fee for service. So we're between like 92 to 96% given the year fee for service. And so our tuition follows the student. So we don't just get a block of money from the state and we're told how to do it. We have a daily rate that every day we have to bill the county that's providing us the tuition money for the student that we're serving. We have insurance contracts. And so in our speech therapy, audiology, and occupational therapy clinic, we are dealing with medical billing. But still we have to have the patients coming in the door. So school is B2G, business to government. Clinic is B2C, we're the business serving the customer that's coming in. And the interpreting department is primarily B2B. So our end user is the deaf consumer, but the people paying the bill is a local business or a local hospital or a local, mental health practice, whoever the client is on that side. So can be unwieldy at times, while also we've been very lucky. And this is where I'm very thankful for the people that were leading this organization prior to me, that each business unit has a very distinct funding stream. And when there is chaos in the world, knock on wood, it has not yet hit all of them at the same time. So we have survived much of the political and financial chaos in the nonprofit world over the last, really last 2 years or so, but primarily the last 10 years. Okay, because we're able to pivot and adapt and be nimble and responsive to the community need, and have multiple different funding sources to support us along the way.
Yeah, I think it's really interesting that having sat on nonprofit boards and have been asked to sit on some boards that I've declined, and having volunteered or donated, like I've gotten under the hood of different types of organizations, or at least like even on the boards I've declined, like got enough information. And I think another thing that's really interesting, and you alluded to it earlier, there are tremendously bright people in nonprofit organizations. And I know nonprofits that are run that, like, sometimes I'm like, oh, geez, I would want you as a CEO to run my for-profit business, because you have to be, to your point, you get funding sources from different ways. You have to be specific on where your, money is going. It shows up in the community that you serve. I mean, I feel like it involves almost like another layer of, I don't know what the word is, operational skill than a lot of for-profit businesses. And I don't think that nonprofits often are looked at that way.
I appreciate you saying that very much. Thank you, on behalf of the entire nonprofit community, because I agree with you. I honestly think, now I don't have private experience. I've been in education and healthcare. When I talk to centers of influence and people in my network, they're like, gosh, your job seems harder than mine. And I'm like, you can't be like, yeah, I think it is. I think it might be.
There's more complexities than people, I think, give it credit for.
Yeah, thank you. It is very complex and very nuanced, because you're not selling widgets. I'm not selling sneakers. I'm not selling, I don't even know, pens, mugs, all important things. We need them, obviously. Right. I love my mugs. But it's different when you're selling human services. That sounds creepy. You know what I mean? Yeah. It's different when your product is supporting communities and trying to create lives of choice, to trying to make sure that humans have what they need to be the best versions of themselves. So I agree, it's hard. So everyone who's listening, check up on your nonprofit friends, especially now, because it's hard out there. Legislative session just ended in Maryland.
Yep.
These are things that I'm acutely aware of, that we are constantly thinking about and trying to strategize to make sure that our community has what they deserve. Not everybody's constantly aware of the political environment and the economic environment, and state, local, federal. You can't just sit back and do your thing. You have to be the person who watches the news. You have to be the person who's on social media and knows what's going on. You have to be in tune. You have to be aware. And maybe this is why I'm enjoying this job. You have to be curious, because without that curiosity, you're never going to crack the code to what's going to make the organization thrive.
What's you talked about a little bit earlier, but I want to give you the opportunity, if it's the same thing or something different. What's something that, like for somebody who is just graduating school, let's say, what's like the one piece of advice that you would give to that person, regardless of what industry they're in or what they want to go in, or if they're following, similar footsteps as you? Just somebody's a recent grad. What's the one piece of career advice that you would give them?
I think the biggest disservice we do to young people, maybe a little earlier than the question that you're asking, but during the formative years of their lives, what do you want to be when you grow up? I have stricken that from my vocabulary, because it forces people to pick in a way that maybe isn't necessarily developmentally appropriate. And I feel like sometimes it can be too restrictive. And so for a 22-year-old, career advice: find a path, Find a company, find relationships, find a culture that fits who you are as a human and who you want to be as a human. Money matters. Absolutely. You need to make sure you can pay your bills, and you have to be smart. While also, you will never be able to predict what your life is going to look like in 10 or 20 years. I mean, I look back to my life pre-pandemic to now, and I'm like, how did I get here? Right? And so that's that's why platforms like this exist, because you do not have to have it figured out when you're 22. So I would say to young professionals, to new grads, take the risk. This is the time to take the risk. If you want to move to a new city and try something, go. It's going to be much harder when you're in your 40s and 50s. It's going to be much harder if you choose to have children, to make those sort of jumps. So do it when you're young. If you've always lived, I regret I went to undergrad and graduate school in the same place, and then I took a job 2 hours away, and that felt exotic.
Mm-hmm.
I got into some schools in California. Into some schools in New England, but I was too anxious and too scared to take the risk. And I don't necessarily regret it, because every life choice has gotten me here right now. And I'm so happy where I am. Well, also, I wish I had taken the risk.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's like this. I feel like when people say, what do you want to be when you grow up? It sounds so finite. And part of the reason that I started this podcast is most people's journey to where they are currently, which is not even the final chapter, by the way, right? Like there's a lot left in the book. Um, wasn't necessarily a direct, clear, linear line. And I just find it so fascinating. But it's like I love that you say that, because nobody tells people like, hey, it's okay. It's as much about what you don't want to do. It's like you try something. Oh, I like this part of it. How can I do this part? And then, pull another piece of something else, and people kind of build their careers that way.
Yep.
Yeah, I think you nailed it. You nailed it.
And falling forward,
Mhm.
like if you don't fail if you learned something about yourself, what you want to do, what you don't want to do. You know, People pivot, people change their minds, people get
Mhm.
fired, people start over, and they're still their beautiful, authentic selves. There's
Mhm.
no judgment there. And so
Mhm.
take the risk.
Yep. Yep. I love it. Um, what would be is there another time, like an instance, this is my two more questions and rapid fire. Is there a time outside of when you left to take the position that you are now, is there another time in your career where there was like a distinct moment where you learned something, or you learned a lesson, or you were like, okay, I'll never do that again, or okay, I know that that works. Um, do you have any of those types of experiences?
I have them. I definitely have those uh, aha leadership moments. And I think that some of them happened in the past year where I forgot lessons I learned because I was busy, distracted, chaotic. And my biggest takeaway of the past year or so is relationships matter. And so even something that could seem unemotional can cause big feelings in people. And my perception of what's right or wrong or has value or should be no big deal is going to be very different than someone else's because of their experiences or what they're bringing to the table. And I won't go into all of the details, but we made some operational changes at the organization that were for some financial moves. We had to make some changes with some big systems, and I didn't think these things were going to be emotional, because it's like a payroll platform or a copy machine. Like who cares about that?
Mhm.
People care about money, and they care about being able to get their job done. And so any disruption to that requires much more attention to relationships and input and getting buy-in, and the human piece of it I had dismissed with some of these decisions because I was heads down just trying to get stuff done.
Mhm.
And I've learned a lot about the value of relationships over my career, but especially being reminded of it in the past 6 to 8 months.
That's an excellent point. I feel like as a leader, the buy-in component, if you can remember to do that and when appropriate, like level appropriate, I feel like it generally makes things easier. But to your point, it's like sometimes just getting so focused in the execution, right? Like you're the president, you're in an execution mode to get things done and moving. Um, I love that you highlight relationships. That is such an important part of any workplace dynamic. What for? So this is my final question before rapid fire, which is unrelated to anything that we talked about. But before I get to my final question, what is the best way for people to get in touch with you or to learn more about Gateway Maryland?
Follow us on social media. So Gateway Maryland, we have a presence on LinkedIn, Instagram, and Facebook. I am a big LinkedIn user, post a lot and definitely engage with folks, respond to folks, and have gotten really positive feedback there. So I think it's Erin Lamb 44. We might have to check that on LinkedIn, but I'm sure we can link it. People can find me, connect with me on LinkedIn, send me an email or send me a LinkedIn message there, and then we can stay connected and follow our page at Gateway Maryland. We have a lot of stuff going on for our 100th. We in true like Gen X sort of way, the thought of throwing like one big event, I was like, that sounds expensive and not really consistent with who we are because we have 3 different business units, 3 different communities that we serve, 3 different employee groups. So we're throwing kind of smaller birthday parties throughout the year. So if folks follow us on social media, they'll be able to come and support us and buy tickets or to be a corporate sponsor for all the different things we have going on. We have a cocktail party we're throwing in June that we're calling our speakeasy. There's going to be some panel events in the fall. So we are going to celebrate our birthday all year long because when you turn 100, it's a big deal.
There you go. We're celebrating year long for sure.
Exactly.
All right, great. I will link those. We will link those up in the show notes. Is there anything else before I get to my final question? Anything that you want to mention or cover? Anything that we haven't yet talked about?
No, I'm curious to see what happens during rapid fire.
Okay. All right. Before our rapid fire, my final question is, how do you define success?
I define success as a life that's filled with both, for all 3 of these things, being independence, joy, and contentment.
Beautiful. Well said. Love it.
Thank you.
Love it. All right, here's rapid fire. So it's like maybe 6, 7 questions. God, 6, 7. If my 12-year-old was around here, I'd get some hand gesture. All right, coffee, tea,
Coffee.
brick, stone,
Ooh. Stone. I just moved into a brick house, so I'll say stone.
Hulu or Netflix,
Oh, Hulu.
east, west,
East.
sun or moon,
Sun.
dine in or dine out.
Ooh, dine out. Especially in Baltimore. Love the Baltimore food scene.
What's your like go-to cuisine? Like what type of food do you like most, or top like 1 or 2?
I really am into the like Mediterranean dishes and flavors of all that stuff.
Yeah.
Whether it's I don't want to name any one restaurant, but all the Mediterranean and all that food scene in Baltimore right now is really yummy.
With the last name like Lamb, I feel like that's appropriate for the Mediterranean. My husband's a Iranian and he loves like any of those Mediterranean restaurants and big lamb eater. So
you know what's funny? So I'm 47 years old. This was the first time I made a reservation at a restaurant and I went to check in and they said, lamb, like the meat? I've never gotten that before. It was always lamb, like the baby animal. And I'm like, yes, like the baby animal. Like lamb, like the meat. Like, yep, we're going with lamb, like the meat from now on.
All right. And the last one in the rapid fire, astronaut or deep sea diver?
Both sound terrifying. I don't watch movies about astronauts or deep sea divers because it scares me too much, but I did just watch all of the coverage of the moon mission. So I'll go astronauts.
Astronaut. All right.
Yeah.
Well, Erin, thanks so much. This was wonderful talking with you and learning more about Gateway Maryland. I'm really excited for your guys' 100th anniversary. We're going to link it up in the show notes so people can get in and learn more about those events and get involved. And hearing your story was great. I know that it's going to resonate with our audience. So thank you for being a guest and for sharing.
Yeah, thank you for having me. Thank you for listening. Thank you for creating this platform. And I hope to connect with lots of folks via social media and keep the hustle going for another 100 years.
There you go. All right, everyone, we will see you next time. Again, my guest was Erin Lamb, the president and CEO of Gateway Maryland. And we will see you next time on the Lauren Asghari podcast, How'd Her Career Get There?
Let's talk a bunch of different topics.
How'd her career get there?
This is a podcast with Lauren Asghari.